They laughed at her uniform like it was a costume. They didn't know the lives she'd saved or the classified missions she'd led. But when a Navy SEAL stepped into that dining room, silence hit harder than gunfire. The decorated warrior's eyes found hers across the room, recognition flickering like lightning. In one fluid motion, he raised his hand to his brow in a crisp salute. That night, the truth saluted back, and her family's mockery died in their throats. My name is Grace Morgan, and I've flown through hell more times than my family has had hot dinners together. But sitting at my parents' dining table that Father's Day evening in their coastal South Carolina home, you'd never know it. To them, I was just their daughter playing dress-up in an Air Force uniform. The smell of Mom's pot roast filled the room, mixing with the salt air drifting through the open windows. Dad sat at the head of the table. Colonel Daniel Morgan, retired Army, his shoulders still squared like he was reviewing troops. Even at 62, he commanded the room without saying a word. My brother Ethan sprawled in his chair across from me, his Marine Corps tattoo visible under his rolled-up sleeve, biceps deliberately flexed as he reached for the butter. "So, Grace," Ethan started, that familiar smirk already forming. "Still flying those desk missions must be tough, all that air conditioning and paperwork." The laughter came immediately. Mom's polite chuckle behind her napkin. Dad's quiet grunt that passed for amusement. Even my sister-in-law Jennifer giggled, though she barely knew what branch I served in. I kept my hand steady as I cut my meat, the knife moving in precise strokes. Inside my mind, I wasn't here. I was back in the cockpit of my MH-60 call sign Valkyrie 1, rotors screaming against the Afghan night. Mortar fire lighting up the darkness like deadly fireworks. 12 soldiers trapped below, radio crackling with desperation. "Remember when she wanted to be a real pilot," Ethan continued, warming to his audience. "Like commercial airlines or something useful. Instead, she's probably teaching PowerPoints about fuel efficiency." "Ethan," Mom said mildly, but she was smiling. "Your sister serves her country too." "Sure," he said, taking a long drink of his beer. "But let's be honest, they're serving and they're serving. Some of us actually saw combat. Some of us just—" He waved his hand vaguely at my uniform. "Wear the costume." My father said nothing. He just carved his roast, eyes down, letting his silence speak volumes about where his pride truly lay. With his son, the real warrior, the one with stories loud enough to fill every family gathering, every neighborhood barbecue, every casual conversation with strangers. I thought about the classified folder in my apartment. The one with the commendation I couldn't talk about. The mission that saved a unit pinned down in Kandahar province. The same unit my father had trained years before his retirement. He didn't know it was me who pulled them out. The report only mentioned Allied air support. Even if he'd seen it, my call sign wouldn't mean anything to him. "At least I didn't wash out after 4 years," I said quietly. Ethan's face darkened. "I got out honorably. To sell gym memberships. To run a fitness franchise," he corrected, his voice rising. 3 locations. But hey, you wouldn't understand business. You just follow orders. Right. Probably never made a real decision in your life." I set down my fork. The metal clicked against the plate. A small sound that seemed to echo. I could tell them. I could tell them about the decision to fly into that hot zone when everyone said it was suicide. About choosing which wounded to evacuate first when I could only carry 6. About the sergeant who died holding my hand because I decided he had to wait for the second trip that never came. But I didn't. I gripped my water glass instead, knuckles white against the crystal. Mom had gotten these glasses for her wedding. Delicate things, she'd said, for special occasions. This was supposed to be special. Father's Day. Family together. "Grace, honey," Mom interjected, her voice dripping with that practiced sweetness. "Ethan's just saying that men and women serve differently. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Your administrative work is important too." Administrative work. I almost laughed. Last month, I'd flown a mission so classified that my crew had to surrender their phones for a week afterward. But to them, I was a secretary in a flight suit. "You're right," I said, standing up. "We do serve differently." I walked out to the porch, leaving them to their assumptions. Behind me, I heard Ethan make another joke. Dad finally laughed out loud. The sound followed me into the humid Carolina night, where the ocean crashed against the shore in the distance, rhythmic and relentless. I stood there, breathing in the salt air, and made myself a promise. One day, they would know exactly how I served. One day, the truth would hit them harder than any war story Ethan could bellow over beers. But tonight, I held my silence like I'd held that stick through enemy fire, steady, unwavering, and alone. The beach was empty at this hour, just past 9:30 p.m., with only the moon casting silver ribbons across the water. I walked barefoot through the sand, my dress shoes dangling from my fingers, uniform jacket left behind on a driftwood log. The waves crashed with a familiar rhythm that made my chest tighten. It sounded too much like rotor blades cutting through thin mountain air. I closed my eyes and I was back there. 2:14 November 17th, 3 years ago. The cockpit was alive with warning lights, red and amber painting my hands as they worked the controls. My co-pilot, Williams, was praying under his breath. I could hear him through the comms. In the cargo hold behind us, 6 wounded soldiers groaned against their stretchers. "Valkyrie 1, abort mission. Repeat, abort mission. LZ is too hot." The command came through static and explosions. Below us, mortar fire bloomed like deadly flowers in the night. 6 more soldiers were down there, pinned behind a blown-out wall, their emergency beacon pulsing on my display like a dying heartbeat. "Negative. Command. We're going in." "Valkyrie 1, that's suicide. You're already smoking." I'd cut the transmission. The aircraft was on fire. True. Hydraulics were failing. But those men below, I'd seen their unit patch during the briefing. The same screaming eagle my father wore in the photo on his office wall. His old unit, the one he'd trained before retirement. The one he still called his boys. The memory dissolved as cold water swept over my feet. The tide was coming in. I opened my eyes to find myself knee-deep in the Atlantic, my uniform pants soaked, the shock of it bringing me back to the present. I thought about my commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chin, no relation to anyone named Chin in this story, just coincidence, who debriefed me after that mission. She'd sat across from me, her dark eyes unreadable, and said something I'd never forgotten. "Heroes don't speak, Morgan. Others tell their story. That's how it's always been. That's how it has to be." "But what if no one tells it?" I'd asked. She'd smiled sadly. "Then you carry it alone. That's the price of the wings." Standing in the ocean now, I wondered if she was right. My silence felt less like humility and more like surrender. Every family dinner, every gathering, every time Ethan puffed up his chest with his boot camp stories while I sat quiet, I was surrendering, letting them believe that my service was lesser, safer, smaller. The water pulled at my legs as it receded, trying to drag me deeper. I stood firm, the way I'd held that stick steady while my aircraft screamed and shuddered around me. While Williams had gone silent, passed out from the smoke, while I'd counted every second, knowing we had maybe 3 minutes before the engine gave out completely, we'd made it. Barely. The helicopter had died the moment the last soldier was pulled aboard the rescue bird. It had crumpled into the desert like a crushed can, burning through the night while we flew away in the backup aircraft. 12 men alive because I'd decided their lives were worth more than mine. One of those men now ran a hardware store in Charleston. Another taught high school math in Greenville. They'd never know my name. The report credited Allied Air Support and nothing more. Classified, redacted, buried under bureaucracy and black ink. A wave larger than the rest crashed into me. Salt spray hitting my face like tears I wouldn't cry. I tasted the ocean and thought about how many times I'd tasted blood in my mouth from biting my tongue, literally and figuratively. How many times I'd swallowed words that might have changed how my family saw me. No more silence, I whispered to the ocean. The words felt foreign on my tongue, like speaking a new language. I'd been trained to be quiet. Good soldiers followed orders. Good pilots didn't brag. Good daughters didn't outshine their brothers. Good women in the military knew their place, even when that place was behind the stick of a burning helicopter, making decisions that would haunt them forever. But standing there, uniform soaked, salt in my hair, I felt something shift. The silence wasn't protecting anything worth protecting. It wasn't humility. It was fear. Fear of disturbing the careful balance my family had built, where men were heroes and women were support staff. I turned back toward the shore, my feet finding solid ground with each step. Behind me, the waves continued their endless assault on the beach, patient and relentless. They didn't announce themselves. They just kept coming, wearing down the shore one grain at a time until even the rocks surrendered. Maybe that's what I'd been doing wrong. Maybe I didn't need to shout my story. Maybe I just needed to stop holding it back when the moment came. As I walked back toward my parents' house, where yellow light still spilled from the windows and laughter still echoed across the lawn, I made a decision. The next time someone dismissed my service, I wouldn't stay silent. The truth would come out, one way or another. No more silence, I said again, louder this time, tasting salt and determination in equal measure. The next morning, I found myself in my father's study. The walls were a shrine to military service. His service, Ethan's service. Framed medals, unit patches, photographs of men in uniform standing proud and tall. My single Air Force photo, taken at my commissioning, sat in the corner behind a lamp, barely visible. Looking for something, Dad's voice came from the doorway. I turned, holding the photo from his deployment to Kosovo, just wondering where the women are in all these pictures. He stepped into the room, his morning coffee steaming in his Army-strong mug. Different times, Grace. Women served differently then. And now, still different. He sat in his leather chair, the one nobody else was allowed to use. Your mother's right, you know. Men and women serve in their own ways. Nothing wrong with that. I studied him, this man who'd raised me on stories of honor and courage. Do you know what I do? Dad, I mean. Really know. You fly helicopters. Transport. Medical evacuation. Important work. Important work, I repeated, tasting the dismissal in those words. Did you ever read the after-action report from Kandahar, November 17th? 3 years ago? His coffee mug paused halfway to his lips. That was classified. Not anymore. Not the summary. Anyway, I pulled out my phone, found the declassified excerpt I'd saved. 12 soldiers from the 101st extracted under heavy fire. Unit commander credited Allied air support with preventing total loss. His jaw tightened. I know what happened. Those were my boys. I trained that unit. I know. I set the phone down. The pilot took mortar fire on approach. Aircraft sustained critical damage. Still went back for the second group. Like I said, I know what happened. His voice had gone cold, the way it did when Ethan disappointed him. But this was different. This was the cold that came from knowing something you didn't want to know. I walked to his desk, picked up the small model helicopter he kept there, a Black Hawk, ironically. You know it was me. Silence stretched between us like a held breath. Finally, he set down his coffee. I suspected. Suspected. The timing. You were deployed then. You flew that aircraft type. And afterward, he rubbed his face. You came home different, quieter, the way soldiers get when they've seen too much. But you never said anything. What was there to say? He stood, walked to the window. Outside, Mom was in her garden, pruning roses in the morning light. Ethan had just come home. He was struggling, drinking too much. He needed something to be proud of. So you let him mock me, Let him call me a desk pilot. I didn't want to steal his shine. The words hit me like shrapnel. I set down the model helicopter harder than necessary. You didn't steal it. Dad, you just buried mine. He turned, and for the first time in my life, I saw him look small. Grace. No. I walked to the wall of photos, pulled mine from behind the lamp. All these years, I thought you didn't know, that if you knew, you'd be proud. You'd tell Ethan to shut his mouth for once. But you knew, and you chose him anyway. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. I found the photo from his unit's rescue, the one published in the base newsletter. In the background, barely visible through the dust and smoke, was a helicopter. My helicopter. You can't even see the pilot, I said, tracing the blurred outline. No name, no face, no credit, just like you wanted. That's not fair. Fair. I laughed, but it came out broken. Mom told me when I was 16 that it's nice I wanted to serve. But men fight differently. You never corrected her. Ethan makes jokes about PowerPoint missions while I'm flying through artillery fire, and you laugh along. Where exactly is fair in any of that? He picked up the photo, stared at it like he was seeing it for the first time. Your brother. My brother washed out after one tour. I've done 6 deployments. Dad, 6. I've been shot down twice, saved more lives than I've lost, and earned commendations I can't even talk about. But sure, let's protect Ethan's feelings. You don't understand what it's like for him, to have a sister who actually did the job. His face flushed red, who makes him feel like a failure. There it was, the truth, naked and ugly in the morning light. So you made me invisible instead. I headed for the door. Message received, Colonel. Grace, wait. But I didn't wait. I'd spent years waiting for recognition, waiting for respect, waiting for my own father to choose me just once. As I left his study, I saw it clearly the Morgan family legacy was built on men's stories. My medals might hang on some wall someday, but they'd always be in the corner, behind a lamp, where they couldn't cast shadows on the men who needed to shine. That night, I found the old photo again, the one with my helicopter blurred in the background. I stared at it for a long time, thinking about invisible heroes and buried truths. Somewhere in that blur was a woman who'd chosen 12 lives over her own, but nobody would ever know her name, unless she decided to tell them herself. 3 years had passed since that Father's Day dinner. 3 years of deployments, missions, and the same family dinners where I bit my tongue until it bled. But today was different. Today was Dad's 65th birthday, and the Morgans had pulled out all the stops. The backyard was packed with people, Dad's old Army buddies, neighbors, some veterans from the local VFW. Mom had strung lights between the oak trees, and the smell of barbecue smoke mixed with the coastal breeze. Ethan was in his element, working the grill while holding court with his stories. So there I was, middle of Fallujah, he boomed, beer in one hand, spatula in the other. Convoy gets hit, and I mean hit hard. IED takes out the lead vehicle. I'd heard this story 17 times. The details changed slightly each telling, getting more dramatic, more heroic. The crowd ate it up, especially the older veterans who nodded knowingly at all the right parts. I stood near the drink table, my uniform crisp despite the humidity. I'd come straight from base, a 3-hour drive, because Mom insisted I wear my costume, her word, delivered with a sweet smile, since there would be veterans present. Grace, Ethan called out, noticing me. Perfect timing. Tell everyone about your latest mission. What was it? Updating flight manuals operating the copy machine. The laughter rippled through the crowd. Dad stood nearby, accepting birthday wishes, pretending not to hear. Actually, I said, my voice carrying across the yard, I just got back from a medical evacuation, hurricane relief in Puerto Rico. Oh, flying supplies, Jennifer, Ethan's wife, asked innocently. That must have been nice, helping out like that. Ethan grinned. See, that's what I keep telling people. My sister's basically a flying truck driver. Important work, Sure, but not exactly Top Gun. More laughter. One of Dad's army friends clapped Ethan on the shoulder. Good thing the real warriors are handling the tough stuff, right? I set down my water bottle, walked closer to the group. You're right, Ethan. Some people lift weights. He flexed automatically, the crowd chuckling. Others, I continued, my voice steady, lift bodies out of burning wrecks. The laughter stopped like someone had hit a switch. Ethan's smile faltered but held. Come on, Grace. We're just joking around. Funny how it's always the same joke. I looked around at the faces. Some uncomfortable now, others curious. The one where I'm playing dress-up while you're the real hero. Grace, Mom warned, her hostess smile straining. This is your father's birthday. You're right. I turned to Dad. Happy birthday, Colonel. Should I tell them about your real birthday present, the one from 3 years ago? Dad's face went pale. Grace. November 17th, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Kandahar Province. 12 soldiers trapped under mortar fire. Their pilot flew through hell to get them out. Aircraft on fire, hydraulics failing, co-pilot unconscious. Still went back for the second group. Ethan laughed nervously. What's this story time? Come on, Grace. Nobody wants to hear I do. The voice came from the edge of the crowd. An older man stepped forward, wearing a faded Navy SEAL trident on his ball cap. His eyes were locked on mine, sharp and calculating. Sorry, he said, extending his hand. Ray Dalton, Master Chief, retired. You said November 17th. Kandahar. I shook his hand, noting the strength still in his grip. That's right. I was running Overwatch that night, watched the whole thing through thermal. His eyes hadn't left mine. That pilot saved those men, flew that bird like it was held together by nothing but will and prayer. Air Force sends their best, someone muttered, trying to lighten the suddenly heavy atmosphere. Ray's expression didn't change. They did. But that wasn't just any Air Force pilot. He stepped closer, studying my face, my insignia. You were with the 160th, weren't you? I felt the crowd lean in, Ethan's stories forgotten on the grill behind him. Once, I said quietly. Ray's eyes widened slightly. Then a slow grin spread across his weathered face. No once about it. I know those eyes, seen them through my scope, lit up by cockpit instruments while mortars fell like rain. His voice rose. Holy hell. Your Valkyrie won. The silence that followed was complete. Even the waves seemed to pause. Ethan's beer bottle slipped from his hand, foam spreading across the deck. Who? Ethan's voice cracked. Ray turned to him, then to the crowd, his expression shifting from recognition to something close to reverence. The pilot who saved 12 men in Kandahar flew through a storm of lead and fire that would have sent anyone else running. He looked at Dad. Including your unit, Colonel Morgan, your old boys from the 101st. Every head turned to my father. He stood frozen, decades of military bearing crumbling under the weight of exposed truth. Sir, Ray said, turning back to me. Ma'am, I never got to say thank you. My nephew was one of those 12. He's alive because of you. Then, in front of everyone, the neighbors, the veterans, my family, Master Chief Ray Dalton, decorated Navy SEAL, raised his hand to his brow in a crisp, perfect salute. The gesture cut through the party atmosphere like a blade, leaving nothing but raw truth in its wake. Ray's salute hung in the air between us, sharp and undeniable. The backyard had gone so quiet I could hear the ice melting in abandoned drinks, the distant cry of seagulls, the hiss of forgotten burgers charring on Ethan's abandoned grill. I didn't move at first. 3 years of silence had trained me to deflect, to minimize, to disappear into the background of my own story. But Ray stood there, unwavering, his salute as steady as his gaze. Chief, I said softly, you don't need to. With all due respect. Captain. Ray interrupted, his hand still raised. "I've been waiting 3 years to do this. You saved my sister's only son. Let me give you this." Something cracked inside my chest. I straightened my shoulders and returned the salute, crisp and precise, the way I'd been trained, the way I'd saluted when they pulled me from my crashed helicopter the second time, the way I'd saluted the families of the men I couldn't save. Ray lowered his hand, but his eyes stayed on mine. I watched the whole thing through my scope that night. Thought I was about to witness a massacre. 12 men, including my nephew Tommy, pinned down with no way out. Then this helicopter comes screaming in, already trailing smoke. He turned to address the crowd, veterans and civilians alike hanging on every word. Command ordered her to abort. Did you know that ordered Valkyrie 1 to turn around? Said it was suicide. But she kept coming. That's... Ethan started, then stopped, his face pale. "I'm not finished," Ray said, his voice carrying the authority of a man who'd commanded in combat. "First pass. She took direct hit from an RPG. Should have gone down right then. Instead, she held that bird steady while they loaded 6 wounded, flew them out, came back for the rest." I felt my father step forward, his movement drawing Ray's attention. "Colonel Morgan," Ray said, and there was something dangerous in his tone now. "You knew, didn't you? You had to know. Those were your boys she saved." Dad opened his mouth, closed it. For the first time in my life, I watched Colonel Daniel Morgan, decorated officer, trainer of soldiers, have no words. "He knew," I said, my voice carrying across the silent yard. "He's known for 3 years." The murmur that went through the crowd was like wind through grass. I saw neighbors exchange glances, veterans straighten their shoulders, Mom's friends clutch their drinks tighter. Ray's expression hardened. "You knew your daughter was Valkyrie 1 and you let..." He gestured toward Ethan, who looked like he might be sick. "You let this happen. The jokes, the disrespect. It's complicated," Dad managed. "Complicated." Ray laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Let me uncomplicate it for you. Your daughter flew into hell. Twice. Aircraft on fire, co-pilot unconscious, hydraulics failing. She had every reason to abort, every excuse to save herself. Instead, she saved 12 men. 12 families got their fathers, sons, brothers back because she decided their lives were worth more than hers." He pulled out his phone, scrolled for a moment, then held it up. The photo showed a young man in army fatigues, smiling. "This is Tommy, my nephew. He's got 2 kids now, 3 and 5 years old. They exist because of her." Ray pocketed the phone and looked around the crowd. "How many of you have heard Ethan's war stories? Show of hands." Almost everyone raised their hands. Ethan looked like he wanted to disappear into the deck. "Now, how many of you knew that Grace Morgan was Valkyrie 1, that she's got a Distinguished Flying Cross, 2 air medals with valor, and a classified commendation that I'm not supposed to know about but do..." No hands. Not even my father's. "That's what I thought." Ray turned back to me. "Ma'am, I've served with SEALs, Rangers, Delta. I've seen courage in every form it takes. But what you did that night?" He shook his head. "That wasn't just courage. That was love. Love for people you'd never met. Love that override every instinct that should have made you turn back." I felt tears threaten for the first time in years. "Chief, I'm not done." He raised his voice, making sure everyone heard. "Valkyrie 1 isn't just a call sign. After that night, it became legend in our community. We'd ask each other, 'Would you pull a Valkyrie?' Meaning, would you go beyond courage, beyond duty, into that space where only love for your fellow warrior could carry you through?" He looked at Ethan. "So no, she's not a desk pilot. She's not playing dress-up. She's the reason 12 families aren't visiting graves every Memorial Day." The silence stretched out, heavy with truth and shame in equal measure. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, one of Dad's army buddies started clapping. Slowly. Then another joined. Then another. But I didn't want applause. I wanted my family to see me, really see me, for once. Ray stepped closer, his voice low enough that only those nearest could hear. I know what it's like, Captain, to do the job and watch others take the credit or dismiss your service. But tonight, everyone here knows the truth. Valkyrie 1 saved those men. You saved them. And no amount of silence can bury that anymore. The applause died slowly, leaving behind a silence that felt like the moment between lightning and thunder. I stood in the center of it all, watching my family's faces crack and reshape like ice breaking on a frozen lake. Dad was the first to move. He rose from his chair with the careful precision of a man whose world had just shifted off its axis. His hands trembled. I'd never seen them tremble, not even when he'd gotten the call about Grandpa's heart attack. "At ease, Chief," he said to Ray, though Ray hadn't been at attention. Then he turned to me, and for the first time in my adult life, I saw my father truly look at me, not at his daughter, not at the quiet one, not at Ethan's sister, at me. "Your sister saved my team," he said, his voice carrying across the yard. Each word seemed to cost him something. "She flew through mortar fire when we were surrounded." Ethan stared at us, his mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. "Dad, what are you talking about? What's he talking about?" "November 17th, Dad continued, his eyes never leaving mine. "I got the call at 3:45, Mem. 12 men from my old unit were trapped. Kandahar province. Command said they were writing them off. No air support would go in." "But someone did," Ray interjected. "Someone did," Dad repeated. "The report only said Allied air support. Classified. But I knew. Afterward, I knew." "Then why?" The question erupted from Ethan, raw and confused. "Why didn't you tell us? Why did you let me?" He gestured helplessly at nothing, at everything, at 3 years of jokes that suddenly weren't funny. Dad's military bearing finally cracked completely. "Because you needed to be the hero," he said simply. "You came back broken, drinking, angry. You needed something to be proud of. So you let me mock her." Ethan's voice rose. "Jesus Christ, Dad, I called her a desk pilot at every family dinner, every barbecue. He turned to me, his face twisted with something between shame and anger. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because you never asked," I said quietly. The words hit him like a physical blow. He staggered back a step. "Grace, no." I cut him off, my voice steady. "For 3 years, you never once asked what I actually did. Never wondered why I came home with bruises, why I had nightmares, why I jumped at fireworks. You just assumed. All of you assumed." Mom stepped forward, her hostess smile long gone. "Honey, we didn't know. Because you didn't want to know." I looked at each of them in turn. It was easier to keep me in my box. The quiet daughter, the support role, the one who wouldn't outshine the family's real warrior. A woman in the crowd whispered, "She's a hero." The word rippled through the gathering. Hero, hero, she's a hero. Ethan's face had gone from pale to red. "So what? You're better than me, is that it? You saved some people and now—" "Stop." The command came from Ray, sharp enough to cut glass. "Just stop. This isn't about being better or worse. Your sister did something extraordinary, and instead of recognizing it, you've spent 3 years diminishing her service. Own that." Ethan turned on him. "You don't know." "I know enough," Ray interrupted. "I know she flew into a situation that had a 90% casualty probability. I know she made a choice that should have killed her. I know that when her helicopter finally died, she'd gotten everyone out." "Everyone! Do you understand what that means?" The crowd was pressing closer now, drawn by the magnetic pull of revealed truth. I saw camera phones coming out, quickly lowered when Ray's glare swept over them. "You want to know the difference between noise and courage. I asked Ethan, my voice carrying clearly. Courage is silent. It doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need appreciation. It just does what needs to be done and lives with the consequences. That's not fair, Ethan stammered. I served too. You served. I agreed. And that matters. But you've built your entire identity on 4 years of service while treating my 10 years like a hobby. So no. Ethan, I'm not better than you, but I'm done being less than you in this family's eyes. Dad stepped forward then, and the crowd seemed to hold its breath. He stood before me, this man who'd taught me to tie my shoes and ride a bike, who'd missed my commissioning ceremony for one of Ethan's football games, who'd known my truth and buried it. Slowly, deliberately, Colonel Daniel Morgan, retired, raised his hand to his brow. Captain Morgan, he said, his voice thick with something I'd never heard before. Thank you for bringing my men home. The salute hit me harder than any of Ray's words. Gasps rippled through the guests. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Mom pressed her hand to her mouth. I stood there, looking at my father as he held the salute, and felt something I'd carried for 3 years begin to crack. Not healing. Not yet. But the first fracture in a wall I'd built around the parts of me they'd never wanted to see. At ease, Colonel, I said softly, but he held it a moment longer, his eyes wet, before finally lowering his hand. The crowd stood frozen, as if movement might shatter whatever had just crystallized in the humid Carolina air. I could feel their eyes on me, neighbors who'd known me since I was 5, veterans who'd shared beers with Ethan while I served drinks, Mom's book club friends who'd always asked when I'd settle down and give them grandchildren to coo over. "She's Valkyrie 1, someone whispered, and the name rippled through the gathering like a stone dropped in still water. "The pilot from the Kandahar rescue, Morgan's daughter. She's been here all along." An older veteran pushed forward, a man I recognized from Dad's poker nights. "I heard about that mission. They teach it at the War College now. The pilot who wouldn't abort." More murmurs, more stares. The weight of sudden visibility pressed against my skin like humidity before a storm. Ethan stood apart from everyone, his face cycling through emotions like a broken slot machine. "Why didn't you tell us?" he asked again, but this time it came out broken, almost pleading. "Because you never asked," I repeated, gentler this time. "Not once in 3 years did any of you ask what I did over there. You just assumed. And when I tried to hint, tried to share, you'd talk over me with another story about boot camp." He flinched. I didn't know." "No," I agreed. "You didn't want to know. There's a difference." Jennifer, Ethan's wife, stepped toward him but stopped halfway, uncertain. The dynamics of the entire family had just shifted, and no one knew where to stand anymore. Mom finally found her voice, though it came out reed thin. "Grace, honey, if we'd known what," I turned to her, "you would have suddenly believed women could be warriors. You would have stopped telling people I was in the administrative side of the Air Force." She had the grace to look away. "Your daughter's a hero," Ray said, his voice cutting through the awkward silence. "She's got more confirmed saves than most medics. She's been shot down twice and got back in the cockpit both times. She's the kind of warrior other warriors tell stories about." "Stop," I said quietly. "Please." Ray studied me. "Why they need to hear this?" "No," I said, looking around at the faces surrounding me. "They need to understand the difference between noise and courage." I walked to the center of the gathering, where the light from Mom's string bulbs cast overlapping shadows. "You want to know what courage looks like? It's not the stories Ethan tells. It's not even what I did that night in Kandahar." Ethan stiffened, but I continued. "Courage is the Army specialist who held his buddy's intestines inside his body for 40 minutes until I could get there. It's the medic who ran into fire 7 times to drag wounded to my helicopter. It's my co-pilot Williams, who came back from traumatic brain injury and still flies, even though his hands shake every time he hears a backfire." The crowd had pressed closer, hanging on every word. "It's Tommy," I said, nodding to Ray. who was 22 years old and chose to stay behind to hold the landing zone so others could evacuate first. It's every single person who serves in silence, who does their job without recognition, without applause, without their family ever knowing what they've sacrificed. I looked directly at Ethan. You don't owe me an apology, but you owe them the truth. Stop making service about volume. Stop making it about who has the loudest stories at barbecues. Some of us come home with our stories classified. Some come home with stories too heavy to tell, and some don't come home at all. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. He opened his mouth, closed it, then said quietly, I was scared. The admission hung between us. In Fallujah. I was so scared I couldn't stop shaking. Every story I tell, I leave that part out. How I threw up before every patrol. How I cried myself to sleep. How I was relieved when they sent me home. Jennifer moved to him then, took his hand. That's courage too, I said, being scared and serving anyway. But you was terrified, I finished. Every single flight. That night in Kandahar, I was so scared I bit through my lip. You can still see the scar. For the first time in 3 years, Ethan really looked at me, saw the thin white line on my lower lip, the burn mark on my neck I always covered with makeup, the way I stood with my weight slightly forward like I was ready to run. I'm sorry, he said, and meant it. I'm so goddamn sorry, Grace. I nodded, accepting it but not absolving. Not yet. Some things take time to heal. Dad cleared his throat. I owe you more than an apology, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I owe you recognition, respect, the truth. He turned to address the crowd, his command voice returning. My daughter, Captain Grace Morgan, is the finest pilot I've never had the courage to acknowledge. She saved my men. She saved 12 families from grief, and I let her sit silent while others took the spotlight because I was too much of a coward to admit my daughter had surpassed anything I ever did in uniform. The words landed like artillery shells, each one reshaping the landscape of our family. Sir, Ray said to me, respect radiating from every word. Ma'am, would you tell us about that night? The real story. I looked around at the faces, expectant, ashamed, curious, proud. My family stood among them, finally seeing me not as daughter, sister, or woman, but as warrior. No, I said simply. Just learn the difference between noise and courage. That's all I ask. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of understanding, of recalculation, of truths finally acknowledged. The party had lost its festive atmosphere, replaced by something heavier, more honest. I turned from the crowd, from my family's stricken faces, and walked toward the edge of the deck where the lawn met the beach path. Behind me, conversations started in hushed tones, not the boisterous laughter of earlier, but the quiet murmur of people reconsidering everything they thought they knew. Ray nodded to me once, a gesture of respect between warriors, then melted back into the crowd. He'd done what he came to do. The truth had been witnessed. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded me too much of that night in Kandahar. I could feel my family behind me, Mom wringing her hands, Dad standing at attention even though no one had called him to it, Ethan looking lost in his own backyard. Grace, Mom called softly. Please don't go. I paused but didn't turn. I'm not going anywhere. Mom, I'm just done being invisible. The ocean beckoned beyond the dunes, its rhythm constant and indifferent to human drama. I walked toward it, my dress shoes sinking slightly in the grass. Each step felt like shedding weight I'd carried for too long. Wait, Ethan's voice, closer than expected. I stopped, turned halfway. He stood there, stripped of his usual bravado, looking younger than his 36 years. I need to know, he said. That night. Were you scared, terrified? I admitted. But fear isn't the opposite of courage. Indifference is. He nodded slowly, processing this. All these years, I've been so loud because I thought if I didn't keep telling the stories, they'd disappear. Like I'd disappear. You don't need to be loud to matter, Ethan. But you were silent. Because they made me be, I said, glancing back at our parents. And I let them. That's on me. Dad stepped forward then, moving with the careful precision of someone approaching unexploded ordnance. Grace, I know. I cut him off. You're sorry. You're proud. You wish things were different. I know. No, he said firmly. You don't know. You don't know that I've read every report I could get my hands on. That I've known for 3 years that my daughter is the pilot other pilots aspire to be. That I've been a coward, choosing comfortable lies over uncomfortable truths. The admission hung between us like morning mist. I chose wrong, he continued. I chose the easy path, protecting Ethan's ego instead of honoring your service. That's not the officer I trained to be. It's not the father I should have been. I studied him, this man who'd taught me about duty and honor but failed to practice it when it mattered most. So what now? Now! He straightened his shoulders. Now everyone knows. The truth is out there, witnessed, saluted. You can't put that back in the bottle. I don't want it in a bottle, I said. I just wanted it acknowledged. Once. Just once. The crowd had started to disperse, guests leaving with whispered conversations and backward glances. Some stopped to thank me for my service, words that felt strange after years of silence. Others simply nodded, understanding that sometimes the biggest revelations need space to settle. Mom approached tentatively. Grace, honey, will you stay? Please. I looked at my family, arranged before me like a portrait of American dysfunction. The war hero father who'd hidden his daughter's heroism, the loud son who'd built his identity on 4 years of service, the mother who'd believed women served differently. They looked smaller somehow, diminished by truth. I'll stay, I said. But things change now. No more jokes about desk pilots. No more dismissing my service. No more hiding me behind Ethan's stories. They nodded quickly, eager to agree, to make amends. But I wasn't finished. And Dad, I looked directly at him. That photo in your study, the one with my helicopter blurred in the background, frame it properly. Put it where people can see it. Let them ask about the pilot who saved your boys. His voice came out rough. I will, I promise. I turned back toward the ocean, where the last light of day was fading into purple dusk. The waves continued their endless assault on the shore, patient and relentless. Behind me, my family stood in their new configuration, adjusted by truth. I'm going for a walk, I said. When I come back, maybe we can have cake. It is still your birthday, after all. Dad's laugh was watery. Grace. No more apologies, I said over my shoulder. Just see me. That's all I ever wanted. I walked down to the beach, leaving them there to process what had happened. The ocean spray hit my face, salt and freedom mixed together. For the first time in 3 years, I felt the weight of silence lift from my shoulders. Ray was right. The truth had saluted back. My family's mockery had died in their throats, replaced by the copper taste of shame and the bitter recognition of what they'd missed. The revenge wasn't anger. It was simply truth, revealed in front of everyone who had made me invisible. As the waves crashed around my feet, soaking through my dress shoes, I thought about all the silent heroes out there, the ones whose stories remain classified, whose families would never know, whose courage goes unwitnessed. I'd been lucky. My truth had found its voice through a Navy SEAL with sharp eyes and a debt of gratitude. I stood there until the sun completely disappeared, until the party sounds faded to nothing, until all that remained was the ocean's rhythm and my own steady breathing. When I finally turned back toward the house, I saw them all at the window, my family, watching, waiting, finally seeing me not as the quiet daughter or the sister in Ethan's shadow, but as Valkyrie 1, the pilot who wouldn't abort. The woman who'd saved 12 men and never spoke of it. The revenge was complete, not through shouting or confrontation, but through a single salute that changed everything. I walked back to the house, my footsteps sure despite the sand, and whispered to the wind one last time, no more silence. The truth had won. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect across the miles. If this story of hidden heroism and family truth resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Grace's position? Would you have stayed silent or spoken up sooner? Let me know in the comments.